Chief's world. God bless all of you, and I thank you for my
far away from its nest, I had wandered, my Savior, from thee. But thy dear loving voice called me home to thy rest, and I knew there was welcome for me. Welcome for me, Savior, from thee, a smile and a welcome for me. Now like a dove I rest in thy love, and find a sweet refuge in thee. I'm safe from the ark, I have folded my wings on the dove of mercy divine. I am filled with the light of thy presence so bright, and the joy that will ever be mine. Welcome for me, Savior, from thee, a smile and a welcome for me. Now like a dove I rest in thy love, and find a sweet refuge in thee. I am safe in the ark, and I dread not the storm, though around me the surges may roll. I will look to the skies where the day never dies. I will sing of the joy in my soul. Welcome for me, Savior, from thee, a smile and a welcome for me. Now like a dove I rest in thy love, and find a sweet refuge in thee. Please excuse me, it's my asthma and my bronchitis. It's continuing to be rough on me.
Good morning again. When I was asked by Karen to go to Donovan, I was in Missouri at the time, but I had to be back out here, and so I wasn't able to be there. And I remember at the time feeling that I was really missing out on something very important and a place that I wanted to be, but I couldn't be there. And so I wrote the following, but I'm going to add to it because that's just me. And so please know this comes directly from the heart. And I wrote this as it was coming from Magnolia Center Church of Christ, which is where Karen and Earl are members. And I started it by saying the world is a little less loving today because a great man of compassion has left us, but heaven's saints are singing one voice loud. One thing I have learned in life, and maybe just learned it in the last few years, and I was talking to Ryan about this just a little bit earlier, and that is I used to think that spirituality came through intellect, through a lot of reading, a lot of studying, and as I got older, I realized that spirituality comes through a tender heart. And it has nothing to do with the others. It's a tender heart. It's a compassionate heart. And Earl Fagan is a very compassionate man. Now, I'm honored to call Earl and Karen both my friend. Earl was a very special man, and I hate using the past tense because Earl is in his homeland now. We're strangers and pilgrims, the Bible tells us, in this land. He's at his homeland. And he's just waiting for those of us that follow the Lord, that give our trust in him, to join him. And I can just imagine him. I can just see him in my mind saying, oh, wait till you get here. Wait till you see what is here. Now, I got to tell you how it all started. In my relationship with him, I was preaching at the Magnolia Center Church of Christ, I mentioned. And as I was preaching, I mentioned my hometown of Alton, Missouri. Now, I say Missouri, but if you're from Missouri, you say Missouri. But if you're not from Missouri, everybody corrects you and says Missouri. But I'm going to say Missouri because it's where I'm from. And Earl would say Missouri in my presence and tell other people Missouri, and I noticed that about him. Anyway, in my lesson, I mentioned Alton, Missouri. When I was finished, Earl made a beeline to me, and he looked at me and he said, have you ever heard of Koshkonong, Missouri? And I said, well, of course I have. It's only about 10 miles between there and West Plains. And he said, that's right. And he said, but I bet you've never heard of Couch, Missouri. I said, my father was born in Couch, Missouri. It only has a post office, that's all it has. And a bus would stop there on our way back to our place. And he looked at me and he started pointing at me. Now, if you know Earl, he pointed when he talked. And he started pointing and he said, yeah, well, you've never heard of Tommy Dills, I'll bet. I said, Tommy's my first and third cousin. Now, for those of you that are here, our tree does fork back in the Ozarks. It's just like brothers and sisters will marry somebody else's brother and sister, okay? So there's no real bloodline there. He told me that Tommy was his roommate in college. Now, I've got to share with you, this morning before I left our place to come down here, I called Tommy. And I talked to him in the same way that I did when I was back in Missouri and I found out about Earl. But I asked him this morning, I said, Tommy, would you like me to say something? Now, Tommy, since his days with Earl, they were roommates together in college. Tommy played basketball, and Tommy said, you know, Earl was so focused on his studies. He said, the one thing I will tell you about Earl is he is the real McCoy. What you see with Earl is what Earl really is. He said, even at that age, in the college days, which sometimes sometimes morals and other things get stretched a little bit, he said Earl was always very focused on who he was and where it was that he was going. I've got to share this too. Before I left Missouri to come back out here when I wasn't able to be at the funeral in Donovan, I was in Simpson's Hardware, which is this little hardware store. There were about 8 to 10 people there. And I said, has anyone here ever heard of Earl Fagan? And they kind of looked at each other, and they'd lived there for a while. And from back in the back, I heard a lady say, Earl Ray Fagan. He was the handsomest man in this entire county. Dean Simpson came out and started telling about what she knew of Earl Fagan. Now, I never looked at Gary Simpson, her husband, when she was saying this to see how he was taking it, but apparently he knew Earl, and she knew Earl, and just thought the world of him. Whenever I heard that Earl had passed from this life to his reward, I was saddened because of my selfishness. I loved Earl. We had a very special relationship, times that we would either share in person or to talk on the telephones. And maybe it was all selfish because I was going to miss my friend. But let me tell you something about Earl and Karen Fagan. Now, if you've been their friends, I'm probably not telling you much that you don't already know. But they love people. I mean, that's really something. They love people. I've heard several Christians say, I just kind of hate people. Isn't that horrible? Have you ever been there? Have you ever been cheated out of something, or somebody treated you wrong, or somebody cut you off, and inside you're thinking, I just don't like people very much. Earl and Karen love people. I heard someone say one time, I don't really like people, but I love their souls. I'm not so sure you can do that. How do you separate a person from their soul? But Earl and Karen both have always looked for opportunities to help people, to serve people. Now, Earl was a man of some means, but it was never a means to the end. He used what he earned with a focus on doing God's will and God's work. And I know for a fact from some of the phone calls that he and I had that he would sit at home and he and Karen would talk or think about ways that they could help people. Sometimes it's easier to give money, isn't it, than your time? I mean, somebody needs something, you can reach in your wallet, you can throw a few dollars at them, and you feel like you've really done God's work. Earl didn't just give up his money. He gave up his time. Every Monday night, we have a group of people that come together. Now it's 2 nights a week. Now it's Mondays and Wednesday nights before services. But on Monday nights and Wednesday nights, we have this group that meet, and we call them our prayer warriors. And they come together with just one purpose. Anyone who has turned in a card that has asked for prayers, or anyone that personally has come and said, will you pray for me? Or if we just knew about someone that needed prayer, this group comes together and, I mean, faithfully. As a matter of fact, the one who kind of leads this is here tonight. I'm not going to embarrass him, but Jay and Barbara are with us, and they've led this group. Earl and Karen were such an important part of this group. Now, such an important part, as a matter of fact, as I was sitting here, the leader of this group said to me, he said, you know, you can tell a man by the kind of prayer that he prays. Because of the way that Earl would pray. It was so full of compassion for people. And then this same person said about Earl, he said, if anyone in this group ever received a gift or a donation or something that they needed and they didn't know where it came from, I can almost tell you right now, it came from Earl and Karen Fagan. They just didn't know. Now I'm going to share something else with you. Well, before I get there. In this prayer, in this time of praying, there was a prayer that Earl and Karen always said. And this was, I've got the quote here, Lord, please remove the threat of cancer from the experience of mankind. I remember the first time I heard them pray that. And then every week they would pray that same prayer. I mean, they would say several other things and pray about other people, but they would mention those words. When Earl got sick and could not come, and so he and Karen weren't able to make the prayer warriors, and I'm sure they were praying at home, but someone in that group would repeat those words out of respect for Earl and Karen, and also for the tremendous heart that they had toward people that had suffered with this horrible illness. And so anytime we meet together with prayer warriors, I always think of Earl and Karen, and so does everyone else that's there. One other thing I've got to share, and a lot of people at our congregation doesn't know this. Whenever we do something, we know that we pray so that everybody doesn't see us pray. And when we give, you don't want other people to know that you've given what it is. And I understand that, so I hope I'm not breaking any code somewhere. We have a pantry at our church. And we try to give to those people that are homeless or jobless or whatever it is so that we can help them out. For the longest time, the majority of the money that came into that pantry came from Earl and Karen Fagan, above and beyond what they would give to the church, whatever that was. I just know that they had that special money earmarked just for people to make sure that they had a little bit of what the rest of us shared. Now, Earl had opinions, and those opinions were very well thought out. If you didn't know Earl, you might think, oh, he's just some fella that seems like a good old boy type thing, and he likes people. Earl was extremely intelligent. Earl was very well studied, and he knew his Bible. And there were times, as with any Christians, you disagree with people on some issue. And if there was a situation that Earl disagreed with, he would lay out why he felt what he felt. And it was almost always of a deep spiritual nature. It wasn't a thing. It was about spiritual things. Well, if someone took that wrong, it really bothered Earl. I remember, on a couple of situations where this occurred, and he would call me and he'd say, listen, I hope they don't think that I'm ill-willed or I think ill toward them and I would say, Earl, your heart is so evident. The compassion that you have is just so evident. But not only was he helping people, he was afraid that people would think that his heart maybe wasn't where it should be. And of course, if any of you knew Earl, you knew that there was no way that was possible. I visited Earl a few times in the hospital and when he was recovering at the convalescent home, attempting to recover from these surgeries. And what I found amazing was in all the times I visited him, I don't think one time he ever said one thing about feeling bad for himself. Not once. And I was thinking of that later. I thought, if I twist my ankle, I want to share that with someone. I want to share the pain that my ankle hurts. Earl never one time shared any of the problems he was going through, but instead he would always say, well, Steve, how's the church? How's the spirituality of the church? Are they growing? Are they getting it? Are they deeper? Are they? And that's what he would talk about, except for there was one other thing that Earl would talk about. That was his love for Karen. I never was at a place with Earl for very long that he didn't talk not only of his love for Karen, but his respect for Karen. For the hard work that she did, for how that she would drive so many miles to take care of both businesses and their home and then drive to see him, and the love that she had for him. Karen, I would like to say that we at Magnolia Center, we're your family. And we do love you. And if there's anything in any way that we can help, we want to be there for you. And we will miss Earl, but we're also here as your brothers and your sisters. For Earl, we're happy. God's promises are true. And I can't even imagine what Earl is seeing right now. I do know that the Bible says death, that word death just means separation, that's all. And as I mentioned earlier, it's just a separation from the flesh and the spirit. But as I said earlier, he's at his homeland. I mean, his homeland, his hometown. He wanted to go to Donovan. He thought that was his homeland, but it wasn't. And he knew it. It was heaven. It's wherever God is where heaven is. I want to thank you for allowing me to be here and to share this, and to Karen especially. Thank you. I was feeling left out from Donovan. Stephen did a wonderful job, and Donovan, I was able to speak to him on the phone. And I want to share one last thing. His sister, Frida, right?
Yeah.
I was able to call Frida on the telephone and talk to her. And by the time I was finished, and we had a pretty lengthy conversation, by the time I was finished, I felt like I had known her all my life. She is one of the most loving, down-to-earth, just wonderful ladies. When I talked to Tommy today, I got a little tickled because I remembered Earl talking about his sister. And so when I was asking Tommy, I said, Tommy, what all do you remember about Earl? And he was sharing. And then he said, he said, what I remember is his sister Frida was always checking up on him to make sure he was studying like he was supposed to study. And then he laughed and he said, but she didn't need to, because Earl was always hard and focused at studying. And as I mentioned earlier, what Tommy was off playing basketball, but he said he knew where he was going, he knew what he wanted, and he said, I knew at that time he was going to be a very, very successful man in life. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. Let me say one thing as Debbie gets up. Come on, I'll have you. When she's finished with this song, we want to open the mic up for those of you that would like to come up and just share a little something about Earl. And so I'm going to take the mic back when she's finished, and we'll pass it out. So you don't have to stand up and come up here. We'll bring it to you. Thank you.
God, thine awesome wonder, consider all the world thy hands have made. The stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Sing my soul, my Savior, God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. And when I think that God his Son that very sent him to die, I scarce can take it in. That on the cross, my burden gladly bearing, he bled and died to take away my sin. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. So come with shouts of acclamation and take me home. What joy shall fill my heart? Then I shall bow in humble adoration and then proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Bless you all. God bless you.
It's always hard to eulogize someone's life in a few sentences, just a few words, but the stories are what goes on. Stories told of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and this is your time. If there's something you'd like to say about Earl, something that you remember that maybe cracks that door a little more for others to see into his life, raise your hand. And don't be shy, and I'll just hand you the mic where you are, because there's a lot of people who have a fear of coming up front. I'll make my way to you.
Hi, everybody. Do I need this?
Yes, you do.
I just want to say Earl Fagan, I'm his next door neighbor, Greg, and I'm touched by all you. Excuse me. I just want to say that Earl and Karen are the purest people I've ever known. Earl was a mentor to me like a father. His advice was sound. And you know, I want to say, not one time did he ever mention to me, other than he took me to church with him a couple of times, but never ever did he have to mention Christ or God. He didn't have to mention it because he was it. He was a shining light. He taught my kids how to make hybrid roses out in the yard. He bought them their own clippers, their own tools. I'm gonna miss him. But I just had to say this. Bless you all.